Thank you.
Progress.
Right. So first, good evening. Of tonight's meeting of the Lunenburg Select Board on Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. Let's all please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live over the Lunenburg Public Access channel, on Facebook Live, on the Public Access Facebook page, and will be uploaded to the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel after the meeting. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. So any public comments this evening from the board?
No.
I've none.
None.
None for me.
The only thing to note is that Mr. Alonso is not with us this evening. It's just the four of us here tonight, and he will be joining us at our next meeting in October. Any public comments this evening from the public? Please be sure to state your name.
My name is Mark Bursch. I live at 20 Buttonwood Place. I'm here in the capacity of the chairman of the Board of Water Commissioners for the Lunenburg Water District. We were here last week to discuss the article that we're going to have at a special meeting. We had anticipated to have that meeting on October 12th. Once we set that date, the ZBA set a meeting for a fairly important item that they're dealing with. We didn't want to conflict with that and give them and the people of Lunenburg enough time to go to that meeting. So we are moving our meeting. Special meeting is now scheduled for 6 p.m. on the 19th. I believe that's the Wednesday at 496 Mass Ave in Lunenburg at the Water District headquarters. The purpose for the meeting is going to be, we're going to have an article to vote to spend approximately $360,000 to study treatment and operation of the Hickory Hills well. We feel that this study is the best course of action for the future of the Lunenburg water supply. So that's all I got. I don't know if there's any questions.
Yes, I have a question. Have you, is there a date scheduled yet for, I'm aware that the part of the plan for what's happening on Howard Street, that there's a request for another vote. Is that scheduled?
We don't, that would, my understanding is that would have to be an additional special meeting because that's a vote of the entire district, not just the Board of Commissioners.
Got it.
So
Okay.
we will also, regarding our meeting that we are having for the treatment, we are going to be sending out an informational flyer in the October 1st bills. We also have another regular scheduled meeting prior to that. If anybody has any questions or would like to come before the board, and I also, anybody that has any questions could also call the Water District and talk to the superintendent. His knowledge is much greater than mine on the whole issue, and I think he's done a great job.
All right, Mark, just I want to ask any other remaining questions? Super. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional public comments this evening? It looks like we have one on Zoom calling in. So we'll go ahead to the Zoom caller. There you go.
Good evening, everyone. This is Bill Tyler, 5 Graham Street. I'm calling on behalf of the Historical Society tonight. I just wanted to have a short announcement. This Sunday is the last opportunity to buy a chance on the Wayland Park bench we've been raffling off this summer. As you may or may not know, we're a nonprofit organization and we rely on donations and membership to survive. And higher prices for electricity and heating, et cetera, have been a struggle for everyone this year, including us. So I would encourage anyone interested in having an authentic piece of Wayland Park memorabilia to come by on Wednesday from 9 till noon. or Sunday from 10 till noon and take a chance on this drawing. The drawing will be at Sunday at noon. And also, I want to take this opportunity to thank the town manager for including us in her reports every week. It's really appreciated. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Any additional public comments this evening from the public? All right, seeing none. Any announcements tonight?
Some sad news. Anyone who knew Bill Gustus, he passed away this week. So just wanted to relay that. When I do have the information on arrangements, I'll forward that along.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it. That is very sad. Thank you. All right, communications from other boards. We do have a request from the parks, and so the chair of the Parks Commissioners, please. Good to see you as always.
Thank you. Good evening, Anna Lockwood, 91 Main Street, and I'm here on behalf of the Parks Commission. So I'm going to just read the letter that I put it together, but we talked about it in our last meeting. At our September 14 Parks Commission meeting, we discussed the Lufa Farms project that is happening on 361 Mass Ave. This property abuts a Lunenburg Park property that is located on 961 Northfield Road that was acquired in 2020 from the Saliba family. It is our goal as a commission to develop this property in the near future. As we look to develop this property, we would like to minimize the traffic impact of a new park on the residents of Northfield Road. We also would like to provide the safest way to access this park. Currently, the only access point would be through the Northfield Road and Northfield Road driving west from the Chase Northfield intersection, a busy intersection which raises concern of safety. As the town proceeds to work with Lufa Farms to launch this project, we ask that the Select Board and Planning Board negotiate on behalf of the Lunenburg residents to request access through an easement from 361 Mass Ave property to the Northfield Road Park. This easement and access through 361 Mass Ave would give us another access point to explore when the time comes to develop this property. This request may seem early since our plans to develop the Northfield Road property are not immediate. However, we see that now is the right time to bring this conversation to the table. Lufa Farms may be looking to receive concessions and support from the town. Also, even if they were to be positively disposed to this proposal, it's good to discuss with them now before they fully develop and invest in their property, in the plans and the property. We understand that this request may not be at the top of your priority list as you engage conversation with representatives of Lufa Farms. Nevertheless, we ask you, if the opportunity presents, to please discuss this proposal with them on behalf of the Lunenburg residents.
Thank you, Ms. Lockwood. Before you step away, to the town manager, have they approached us yet about negotiating a pilot agreement?
Yes, I previously reported on that regarding both their seeking state and local incentives. But it's really in their court right now as far as coming back to us with working about valuations and such.
Got it.
Mhm.
So I was aware of the initial, but there hasn't been any, so what you're saying is that they haven't followed up with any kind of proposal for us to consider?
I know
Yeah.
they had a meeting with the state recently, so waiting the outcome of that. So
Okay. So I think that we're gonna have an opportunity when we meet with them to discuss a pilot agreement, payment in lieu of taxes,
Right.
for us to plug that. But your request is really straightforward. It's for us to kind of support that if this property is developed, that they help provide some access to the other property. Is the board comfortable with us sending a communication to the planning board, just endorsing that concept?
I have no issue with it.
No.
Thank you.
I'll prepare that. I'll send it to the chair of the planning board.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All
Thank
right.
you, Heather.
Thank you. Just making a note to myself. Okay. Any other communications from any other boards? All right, this evening we have a joint meeting with the Finance Committee that starts right on time, 7:10. We have a joint meeting with the Finance Committee to discuss debt capacity, Select Board policies and procedures, Article 3, financial policies, and special town meeting proposed bylaw on capital planning from Finance Committee, as well as anything else that you guys think is necessary. So first, I want to pause to give you the opportunity to call your meeting to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is 7:10. I am the chair of the Finance Committee, Evan Waters, and I am calling this meeting to order.
Excellent. So the intent tonight really is, one of the things that I think is important, having watched several of the Finance Committee meetings, is that there's a lot of, I think, thought and robust discussion about some of the planning that we ought to be doing, some of the plan that we are doing. And so tonight really is us here to listen, to understand, to be able to hear your feedback, where in the performance of your duties you think that something could be different, to give us that feedback on what you think is going very well. And so I know there's a variety of topics. For time wise, we're looking to allocate until 8 p.m. for this discussion. So we do have some time. And so I'm going to really turn it to you guys to start this discussion. If I can, are you prepared to speak about the proposed bylaw?
We are.
Okay. And was that submitted today?
It was.
Okay. So we can start wherever you'd like to.
Why don't we go ahead and start with the bylaw then?
Sure.
Just at least that'll leave us the potentially the most or the least amount of time, depending on how that goes. So at our last meeting, which took place on the 15th, the members voted unanimously to accept or adopt the language that was proposed that Mr. Beardmore worked with town council to develop. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and just read it if you would like. It has been submitted, and then if you'd like, we can discuss it, or I can actually present it, whichever is easier.
Are we able to share this?
Working on it.
And we're getting feedback through this microphone.
I'm just pulling this up here. All right, in our drive, which letter is this?
And
Getting through all these.
Which one is it?
N, like November.
Okay.
Is it in the town minute?
I'm assuming this is after the APDC. Yes, it's on the last page in our drive. All right, so it's up on the screen.
Okay. So just for our members involved to have it, it reads, it's an amending the capital appropriations, and it reads warrant articles and floor motions shall not restrict town meeting voters' ability to propose and approve amendments in totality, description and or scope to individual items or projects in capital appropriation articles and motions. Notwithstanding the above amendments shall not limit the town manager's authority to reapply capital funds among the individual items and projects in the capital plan, nor shall town meeting be authorized to increase the total capital plan appropriation printed in the warrant, or take any other action relative thereto.
Okay.
And so the genesis of this bylaw was actually due to what happened at town meeting in May this year, where we were discussing the possibility of amending the some of the items, or one of the items specifically in the capital plan. And it went through a couple of different attempts to go through moderator and through legal and all of these ideas, just to sort of see, are we allowed to or are we not allowed to? And to our belief, we kind of landed on there wasn't a definitive answer. There was sort of an interpretation that was made, but it wasn't concrete enough for us, in our opinion. And so Mr. Beardmore kind of took the head on this one and worked with town council to draft what we believe is at least the best way that we can put it forward to allow town to act as the appropriating committee, as they should, on a potentially large chunk of our budget that we're spending. And so I'd actually like to kind of turn it over to Peter, just because like I said, this was primarily his project to start with. And his last one on the way out. So Peter, feel free.
Thanks. Before I begin, first of all, thank you for having us tonight to discuss this, as well as the fiscal policies. I think what you're doing as a select board to regularly address all of the policies and bring in the relevant committees is good business, good practice, and I hope it continues in perpetuity. I'd also like to just add on, in addition to the loss of Bill Gustus this week, we also lost John Mayle, who many of you may know. Mr. Mayle was very active in the community for many decades and was the chairman of the Finance Committee for many years. Back in the day when the Finance Committee actually built the budget, negotiated with all of the various boards and committees and departments in town, and brought it as a committee to town meeting before the drastic changes that happened in the charter around the turn of the century. So a longstanding public servant and member of the community and all around good person. We're going to miss him. So to just kind of add on to some of Evan's comments, the town charter is moot on the issue of amending the capital plan at town meeting. What the charter basically outlines is, in fact, the process that we follow and the process that we will continue to follow. And that is at a very high level. The departments bring their requests to the capital planning committee through the town manager's office. The capital planning committee then goes through the process of prioritizing those requests and vetting those requests. And then it reports out to the town manager a priorities list, which the town manager then brings to the finance committee and select board for discussions and recommendations. The town manager then, without any direct influence from either of those committees, decides the funding amount, and that is to a certain extent formula driven. There are funds that come from free cash, raise and appropriate, unexpended capital, and other sources to come up with whatever that line is, that funding amount is for the capital plan. And then she also has the authority to reprioritize and put forth a capital plan as she sees fit, based on the recommendations that come from the department heads, the capital planning committee, the finance committee, the select board, and ultimately she brings that budget, that capital plan to town meeting. That will not change. Nothing that I've just described will change. So there have been criticisms that this totally changes the process, that it makes the capital planning committee irrelevant, that we're instituting some sort of veto authority, that we're going to drive town meeting off the rails. And I'm directly quoting things that were said in this meeting, in this body a couple of months ago. None of that is accurate in my opinion. What this does do is restores legislative authority to town meeting, which is where I believe it belongs, and I believe many members of this committee believe it belongs. But it also adjusts our process to address the times. Over the course of the last several years, the capital plan has gone in FY19 from 1.45 million up to 1.68 in 2020, down to 1.1 in 2021. Last year it was 2.16. And it's largely driven by free cash, as I said, amongst other sources. Free cash will go up this year by another 6% is projected. So the capital plan has gone up blended average over the last 4 years at about 15% annually. And when this process was instituted, we were in a time when we were funding the capital plan by a few $100,000 20 years ago. And the prioritization turned into the prioritization for the most urgent needs that we had as a town to spend capital on, because we just didn't have the money to spend willy-nilly on wants. These had to be needs. And the capital planning committee has continued to do a really good job at prioritizing the needs and to a certain extent wants that have come from department heads. As these numbers have increased and as we have funded the capital plan to the tune of millions of dollars every year for the last several years, it's my belief that we're wandering from needs into wants, or into new opportunities that have arisen that have not been as vetted as some of the other investments that we have made in years past. And that's okay. I mean, that's absolutely okay that we're spending money on wants. That means that we've done good work, that we've spent on the needs, and that we're moving into areas that enhance our ability to deliver goods and services to our community. There's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong with it is a lack of vetting and a lack of oversight and a lack of checks and balances. And let me just give you an example. This past year, there were a couple of items that raised flags for me. One was the F-150 that the police department brought forward, and the other was the tractor that was brought forward by the DPW. And there were extenuating circumstances and reasons for both. And we got into a Q&A both before the presentations that we had in the public meeting with the chief and with the head of the DPW and with the town manager. And I continued to have reservations. I asked for information that it actually got to the point that I did not get the information that I was asking for. And it came down to department heads saying, you have my recommendation, knowing full well that it was going to be part of the capital plan that was brought forth by the town manager, and that it wasn't going to be really, challenged at town meeting because we had no ability to do so. Now, I'm not saying that those are bad investments. In fact, one of them, I was persuaded during the process that we needed to make that investment, the tractor in particular. But had I not been, I think that there should have been an outlet, an opportunity for an end zone interception, if you will, right? An opportunity for town meeting, the legislative body, to have their opportunity to have that oversight and to say, is this something that we truly need? And to hear that case, if it was a bubble case, from that department head, and to ultimately make that determination, knowing that it had gone through a good vetting process with the capital planning committee, the select board, and the finance committee. As a finance committee, we represent town meeting. We're the only board in town that represents town meeting. Every other board is effectively an executive board in Lunenburg. We're not. We are a legislative board. And I felt during the past year that we were limited in terms of the advice that we could bring to town meeting, and town meeting was limited in terms of what they could potentially do with that advice because of the way the article, the capital planning article, was written. So to bring this back around, as I said earlier, the charter is moot on this issue. Our bylaws are moot on this issue. The reason why we are in the situation we're in, where currently the capital plan is brought forth in a way that can't be amended, at least in terms of the line items in the capital plan by town meeting, is because of the interpretation of the way the article was written. And that is an article that you bring forth to town meeting on behalf of the town manager. And so, one potential avenue to deal with this is to word the article differently. But it was on really the advice of town council, and through conversations that I've had with many of you, and through the conversation that you had here on, I believe, the 9th of August, that the best way to deal with this is to bring the issue to the voters at town meeting and to give them the opportunity to weigh in on whether or not they should have the ability to amend the capital plan or capital appropriation articles. And so that's what we have here today. It simply gives town meeting the ability to do exactly that, to make amendments and to vet items on the capital plan that may or may not pass muster with town meeting's thought process in terms of whether that particular item merits investment or not. That's all it does. It doesn't change any of the process up until. It simply changes the process in terms of how it may be voted upon or argued at town meeting. It also preserves in writing certain authorities that the town manager has. So for example, when we vote for the capital plan today, we're voting on the total capital plan and a total number at the bottom, but the town manager has the authority to move funds amongst those items. If one item comes in more, another item comes in less, it gives her flexibility to move capital appropriations within those approved items. And this would preserve her right to do so. It also limits town meeting's ability to inflate the number, right? So we don't want to put forth a warrant that says we're going to spend $1 million and then town meeting goes out and says, no, we're going to spend 1.2 or 1.5. That won't happen. We put in that safeguard into this article as well, to ensure that we're still, more or less continuing down the same process. Again, just affording that ability to make amendments on town meeting floor. So I think I've covered all of the pertinent points. I'm sure there are probably more, but it's certainly open it to other members for comments or whatever.
Yeah, I guess, from my perspective, it just goes to the fundamentals of really US governance that starts at the federal level, down at the state level, and now at the town level, which is the legislative branch holds power first, and the executive branch executes on. I think what this is doing is it is slowing the process such that the legislative branch does not have power first. I heard something about a veto. It's the legislative branch doesn't veto, the executive branch vetoes. So I also fundamentally don't agree with some of the interpretation, because I remember being at town meetings where you had certain members associated with boards that showed up specifically because of the capital plan to ensure that they got the funding that they wanted for certain items. So I think this is a common sense way of preserving the balance of government that we all should strive to get that to. So
All right. I think there's a lot tonight that we're going to agree on. I'm not sure that this is one of them. But I would like to start with going to the board and giving the opportunity for any questions, comments, thoughts.
I don't have any questions. It's pretty straightforward. And I set up on capital planning, so I know exactly what Peter's talking about. So.
You have any thoughts on the proposal?
Not really. I think, it's gonna be on the floor for town meeting.
We will have to vote
I
to
know
make
we will.
recommendations at some point.
But we're not doing that tonight.
No, we're not. No, we're not. Mr. Dwyer, Selectman Dwyer.
I understand the thought process behind there, as Mr. Beardmore eloquently laid out. I personally don't have a huge issue with this particular warrant article. My thought is that the worry is this could lead to a debate on every single capital item. I mean, that's the fear, and the whole capital planning committee and all of that was to help streamline the process of town meeting. And I think the voters having the ability to do this is fine. But one of the things, I'm thinking is that, like we do on many of our articles, we have a consent calendar. If there are controversial capital articles that are coming up before the town, it may be behoove the capital planning committee as well as the town manager to separate those items out ahead of time, so debate can be had on those, rather than trying to pull out or debate every single item on the capital plan. But I don't think that the town voters should lose the ability to do that. I just think, with planning by, as we set up the warrant for town meeting, I think we could save ourselves some of the the need for article like this by separating those items out. And so that's kind of where I stand right now.
All right, Selectman Franco.
Thank you. First, I want to say, Mr. Beardmore, you always put forth a compelling case, whether I agree in the end or not. I'm going to preface this by sort of setting the stage for what my frame of mind is, and I've mentioned this before. When people are standing out in front of Hannaford trying to get ballot questions on the ballot, I almost always sign to get those ballot questions on the ballot, even if I think the underlying question is a horrible idea. And that's because I believe that, it's my thinking on whether or not the people should have the power to vote on or approve something is entirely separate from whether I support that thing myself or not. It's sort of the approach I'm taking here. I don't know whether I think this is a good idea personally. I do see the potential for it to cause piecemeal debate on every single item in the worst case. However, that is a separate question. And I'm inclined, we're not voting tonight, but my inclination is that, I find the argument persuasive that this question on whether or not the people want this power to be able to do this is for the people to decide. And ultimately, I believe in that principle, and it's not my place to preempt their ability to do that. And so I probably would vote in favor of allowing this to go on and be recommended as an article.
Could I make just a couple of comments?
I want to give the town manager the opportunity, then I'll say something.
I just want to start by saying I think this has been said many times before, but the capital planning committee spends a lot of time and effort on going through projects, as well as department heads answering questions that are follow-up questions throughout the process. I know Mr. Beardmore, I think we probably disagree on that there was not sufficient back and forth, but every question that was posed was passed along and to the best of my knowledge was answered. The capital plan, as referenced, we have spent additional funds every year due to available funds. So the number of projects has obviously increased. So in fiscal 22, we had 15 capital projects. Last year, we had 23. And with the expected increase in available funds again this year, expect that number to be same or more for capital projects. So to go through each item as a separate article per se would really lengthen town meeting, I think, rather than keep it under one umbrella, under one article for the capital plan. So that is my comments right now.
All right. So I don't know if we need to spend too much time on this tonight, too much more time. So in our previous discussion about this idea, the select board was 3-2 in favor of this concept getting approved to go into the ballot. And so the two being Mr. Franco, Mr. Dwyer, and Mr. Alonso. And at that time, I think it was Ms. Roca and I were not in favor of it going into the warrant. My opinion has not changed. I'm still in the same position. I'll explain where I'm coming from. But like I said, I think that this is going to make it to the warrant. And I think this is going to go before the voters as you're requesting. And I think that this will be resolved at town meeting in November. And I think that that's what you're looking for. And it sounds as if you have the support for that to happen. From my own perspective, when I read the charter, one of the things I think about is the intent. The charter does not go into detail about how many boards are to function. It goes into the charge of different boards, of what different boards' missions are, what they're supposed to be doing, but it doesn't go into a detailed process. It does for the capital planning committee. It makes an exception there, and it says that here's a process that this committee is supposed to follow. It's very clearly articulated. And the select board has taken the position with town council and the read of the charter and the read of our bylaws that the intent is for there to be a single document. that is provided to the voters of town meeting. So I didn't vote for that change in the charter. I definitely didn't. If I were to vote on that today, I would probably I would probably support it. Is in the frame of the process that's laid out. I'm not in favor of town meeting being the location for a capital planning detailed review. And my reason for that is multifold, but I'd say my top reasons are, I think that we're always looking for ways to get people to be more involved in government. And one way to disinterest a huge group of people is by discussing at town meeting for hours how we're going to spend somewhere between $750,000 and $2.8 million. I think next year we're going to be looking at closer to 2.8. How we're going to spend $750 to $2.8 million on projects that are often really complicated, that usually require some engineering, and that have gone through multiple meetings of vetting to get to that point. I think it becomes a bit overwhelming. I do. I think it's easy for most people to understand why a budget may increase by a couple percent every single year, understanding inflation. I think all that, the things that are in the general budget are all there. I mean, we don't go line by line on the school budget, which if we could, I would certainly cut a lot of things out of it. But we don't go line by line on the school budget in terms of what it is that they're funding, where that 52% of our tax dollars are going. And we don't go, and so I think we create a dynamic if we go down this road where town meeting becomes even less approachable to people. I mean, we see what happens when the article comes up that people care about. The select board intentionally puts those at the end of most of these meetings to keep people in the room. But if we see what happens when they go up, right? Usually the capital plan is one of the first things that's on the agenda. I would venture a guess that if we were to change that going into this spring and put capital planning at the last thing of the agenda, that I don't think a lot of people are going to stick around for it. I don't think that that's the reason why people are there. My opinion. So I'm not in favor of changing the process because my main concern is that it elongates the meetings, which become more unapproachable. We have multiple positions in town that are unfilled, many boards and committees that people just aren't sitting on. And I think that while we may have our ideal of what we want, we want to have a robust conversation amongst the people where people come and they show up and they're willing to get into the meat of issues. I think that that's what we want. The reality is people come for their special issues. And how do we keep them in their seats? And I don't think that going at the very beginning of the meeting, which is usually when this comes up, that going into a multi-hour process, I mean, I don't think that that's going to result in any betterment. So I'm not going to vote for putting it on the warrant. I'm not going to vote for the article. But if somehow my members change their views, and I'm saying that with the understanding that right now the vote is 3-2, that if that were to change, I would also change my vote, not because I actually support it, but because I do agree that while I think this is crystal clear, that I think that it's fair for the question. While I think this issue is crystal clear, if this board should vote to put it on to the warrant, even if I take the personal stance that I don't agree with it, right? So I think that we will offer what you're asking for. Does that sound fair? That's kind of hard to, you can disagree with, I say all the time, reasonable people disagree. When you're having a conversation, you feel exhausted, it's because you're not dealing with a reasonable person.
Mr. Jeffries, couple points here. First of all, this committee considered, and individuals on this committee considered bringing this article forth through a citizen's petition. And we discussed it, and as a committee opted that none of us would do that because of the indication that your board made back on August 9th. Yep. So I just want to stipulate that our expectation of you is to put this on the warrant.
And that's my expectation as well.
So just to be very clear, had you not gone down that road at that meeting, which we've discussed, and not levied an opinion, we may have taken a different path on this. So in terms of how you, Mr. Jeffries, and how the town manager have characterized what may happen. First of all, we're not proposing separate articles for each capital item. That's not what this says. That is again, a mischaracterization of what we're attempting to do here. What we are looking to do is to give members of committees and members of the public the opportunity to ask relevant questions on specific items if they so choose, and to give folks the opportunity to propose amendments if they don't think that those items meet muster. Now, just as an example, we passed a budget, an omnibus budget this past year for $44 million. 23-ish went to the school department that we couldn't amend, but there was another $21 million there that we could have looked at any line on that budget, asked questions, made amendments. We passed it in about 2.5 minutes. I don't think there were any questions asked last year. The year before, 1 or 2. There hasn't been an amendment proposed to the omnibus budget since I proposed one in 2019. That was the last time. $20-ish million a year of amendable content that nobody has proposed an amendment. In 2020, I did make a motion to change the capital plan. That was during the COVID year. And I thought, as well as Mr. Passios thought at the time, that we should reduce the amount during the annual town meeting because we weren't sure of the money situation due to COVID. We proposed specific items for removal. The debate it was heard, ironically. The wording of the article was exactly the same as it was this past year and the year before, but the amendment was heard. The debate went on for about 15 minutes and it was closed, and the amendment failed. And we went on and we passed the capital plan. It took about 15 minutes. I don't think that the chaos that you've just described is a likely scenario, given the exact reason that you gave, which is people are aware of the amount of vetting and conversation that goes into this stuff, right? It's very unlikely for an item to be brought up unless there is a honest debate on the merits of that item. And if there is an honest debate, and if it deserves to be heard, then it deserves to be heard. And it's really as simple as that. So I think the way you've characterized it is I understand your reasoning. I just don't think it's a likely scenario. And in the eventuality that it were to occur, we've worked our way through some chaos at town meeting in the past as well. It seems to happen every year on one article or two, having nothing to do with the budget or the capital plan. And we get through it and we move on, and we will move on in that circumstance as well. But doing it while we're exercising our civic duties in a robust democratic process. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I just want to say I wasn't trying to infer that this proposed article would be separating out each capital plan. That was more Mr. Dwyer's, Selectman Dwyer's suggestion about separating out contentious
Okay.
articles
I
into
misunderstood.
separate articles. But I also just want to add that maybe a more optimistic view of why there aren't proposed amendments on the floor at town meeting is because we've gone through such a vigorous process leading up to town meeting to answer all those questions. And having those televised meetings, people are seeing that discussion and seeing what is behind the budgets.
I wholeheartely agree with you,
I've-
Mrs. Levine.
I've-
But also they do so knowing that if they disagree with something, they can make an amendment. They can propose an amendment, but I agree.
So I have a question. One of the things that's not necessarily fair is representation at town meeting and where the people are coming from in town. That we know that Hickory Hills and the center of town are overrepresented and on town boards and generally at town meeting. So I'm going to ask a scenario and tell me if this is possible with this change. If this is approved, can I, living on Hickory Hills, and let me not pick on Hickory Hills, let me go to Whalen. Let me pick on Whalen for a second. Actually, no, Hickory Hills is probably the best example. Can I, on Hickory Hills, living on Hickory Hills, can I come to a town meeting and vote to amend with this change, vote to amend the capital plan to add something that maybe, let's say we want the lake to get treated this year and we want the town to pay for it for $220,000. Right? Now, I know this is private property, right? And so maybe, let's say Lake Shirley does this, in either lake, right? With this change, can I amend the capital plan to add in a project that is not already proposed?
You cannot.
And what language restricts me from doing that?
So this is a discussion that I had with the moderator, and this would be because it wasn't listed in the capital plan. Excuse me, in the warrant initially, it would not be allowed based on the rules of town meeting. That you basically, it's you can't add to, you can subtract from concept. But no, I don't believe you would be able to do that.
So is that the general belief of everyone on the capital plan? Well, now I'm calling it capital plan committee, on the finance committee, that no one can add anything. So in this event, let's say we had a project that was, and I'm gonna give another example out here. Let's say the capital plan said that we're gonna do a culvert on Flat Hill. And me and all my friends who live down Flat Hill and Page and everywhere around Flat Hill Road get together and say, why don't we make an amendment to decrease the work that's happening in Whale? And we don't need those sidewalks. And let's triple this amount so that way the total stays the same. And I really want to have some brick roads down here instead of just asphalt. I'm just being ridiculous.
Yeah, I understand.
Can that happen?
So it probably could, but I'm not sure how relevant it would be. So the way the capital plan works effectively, as it's brought forth to town meeting, is you have a list of items and you have dollar values attached to those items. And the town manager targets those items and works, based on those numbers, reports them back to you and us in terms of if they're high or low. That's been an issue that has come up over the last couple of weeks with some items that the DPW is in the process of purchasing, for example. But the town manager actually has the flexibility to move the money appropriately within the approved capital plan. So theoretically, if one item actually comes in at 1% of the estimated total and another item comes in at 200% of the estimated total, and it all evens out in terms of the final dollars at the bottom of the capital plan, she has the authority to apply that money as she sees fit reasonably. So, and that was an extreme example. Of course, nothing would come in at 1% in today's day and age. Everything seems to be coming in over. But the dollar value associated with that line item is not binding, I guess is the point that I'm trying to make.
So if then
Now, the
town
manager
meeting,
is kind of,
Yeah.
so if
she may have
Made
to
me think
correct
of
me here,
something.
but my understanding is that it wouldn't be binding. Now you could say, I'm gonna delete every other item on this thing, but it ultimately wouldn't, I don't think it would matter.
So if town meeting were to say, we want to take this dollar amount, decrease it down to, I don't know, instead of spending 370,000 on a tractor, we want to spend 100,000, make it work. Does the town manager still have the ability to say, no, we're going to spend 370?
If the total dollar value remains the same at the bottom of the capital plan, then it doesn't matter. If town meeting decides to reduce a particular item, let's say in half, the town manager has to operate, knowing what occurred at town meeting and knowing the sentiment of town meeting, given a particular item. And if the total amount were reduced, it would be incumbent upon her to execute the capital plan in a way that follows the logic of town meeting. That's not to say that she would have to reduce that item by half. She has the money that has been appropriated to apply as she sees fit.
Okay, I think my concerns remain, one thing I say is the risk to town meeting is, and I don't mean this, this is somewhat of a joke, but is the senior class. And what I mean by that is that, given the amount of people that show up at town meeting, what happens if you get the senior class graduating, show up at town meeting one day? And how are they going to vote? And what if there's something on the capital plan that is for, school fields and $50,000, and now that bumps up to 3 million. And I'm using that as an example, but I think that there's a lot of potential for abuse going into a different system. But I do, again, there's a big chunk of the budget that we can't amend. And I would use the same logic for the capital plan that I would use for why we can't amend the school budget on the floor of town meeting. I don't know. I mean, this would put us in a situation where we say there's one budget that we can't touch, but everything else is up for grabs. And I think that maybe there should be two budgets, but nonetheless, I am going to have to allocate more time to this discussion tonight since we've spent so much time on this one. It sounds as if you guys, the board is in support of this getting onto the warrant as previously stated. And I've already indicated that if somehow a vote changes, that I will also change mine just to re-support the fact that the board has already stated that we are in support of this going to the warrant, even though I personally am not in support of it. But that's, this job is not always about ourselves. It's about the group, the boards that we serve and how to do what's in the best interest of those boards. All right. Are we ready to talk about debt capacity?
I believe so.
All right.
So the idea behind our debt capacity discussion sort of arose from discussions that we've had in our committee meetings, where we have noticed that we have these wonderful committees that are put together, TCP, Building Design Committee, we have now the Municipal Building Design Committee and whatnot that are doing really fantastic work for the town, coming up with projects that they would like to work on and ideas for the town and whatnot. But then we get to town meeting and we have a rush to try and get a figure put forward that we can actually put on an article or even just in a report to be presented to the town. And it's come out at this absurd number that ends up getting shot down really quickly. And in an attempt to stop that process from happening that way, or just kind of repeating the same process over and over again, we kind of took a holistic approach to the debt capacity spending and decided instead, does it make more sense to operate in a fashion where we say, we know that we have our two limits. We have our 4% limit, we have our 9% limit that we can spend against. And if we go beyond that, we are going to risk dropping our rating of our bond rating, and we don't want to do that, obviously. But what we do want to do is make sure that we are allocating funds when we have it available for the town to use to restore buildings, build parks, whatever it may be. Doesn't it make more sense to look at our limit and say, okay, we have a hard limit of 9%. Let's pick a soft limit of 8.5% on a flat surface across every year to year to year, moving on. And we can say, okay, what's left over from our debt schedule that we're currently paying down? For example, FY22, we're at 9.44%. Excuse me, not 9%, 11%. So on a soft limit there at 10.5%, we have an extra percent of spending that we can put on there. So does it make more sense to say, okay, here's what we have for our actual income. Here's our 10.5% amount. Here's what we already have scheduled. So now let's look at the difference between the two. And then we can go to and we can forecast that out for a decade, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it may be. And then we can go to our Municipal Building Design Committee and say, okay, we have $1 million to spend or $500,000 to spend each year. And we can do phases in this. I mean, we can project out with, I believe, a decent amount of accuracy how much money we would have in a given year to direct towards different projects the town can then appropriate, rather than saying, here's what everybody wants, now go out and build us this wonderful design, and then say, okay, how much is it going to cost? And it comes in at $20 million over what we were expecting, and we say, nope, sorry, we can't do that. Does it not make more sense to go and say, okay, we can afford a project that costs $20 million over the course of this time period. It will bring our debt capacity limit up to this percentage, which we can then see. We can also appropriate this amount of funds 2 years down the road because the high school falls off the budget, or the primary school falls off the budget. And then we can actually go forward and say, here's what we have to spend. Now let's design a project that actually meets that number, rather than where we currently are, which is just continuously sort of running up a number that doesn't end up passing at town meeting, I believe.
So that's your first question. Would the board like to respond to that? I have a response, but.
Well, my initial response to that is when these projects are undertaken, oftentimes we have a budget number in our head. And it goes through the design process based on the input from various boards and committees. And at the end of the day, once they come up with an estimate, we go, oh crap, it was much higher than we anticipated. So I don't know that slightly different approach is going to change the final answer at the end of a design process.
Mr. Franco, any comments?
I'm just gonna take in data.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think that perhaps there's room for some form of a hybrid. I think that, and my initial thoughts are like, if we think about the Turkey Hill renovation, that, you know, we paid for a study to identify what those costs roughly would be, and we had an estimate. It like tripled the estimate. So, I mean, I think that what we have to be mindful of is that there are hard limits on how much money we can spend. There's always hard limits on how much money we can spend. I think one of Mr. Beardmore's comments to the committee, and he said this pretty regularly, is, you know, we need to have a limit here. We need to have a certain dollar amount that we can spend, not some blank check. And I'm paraphrasing, but that was that was the gist of not having this blank check. I don't think that we go into anything with the blank check. I mean, except for designing schools. I'm gonna be quite honest with you. I've yet to see us design one school. We had a cap on that during the process. We kind of just went with it. School 6 to 8 million, okay. You know, school's gonna be 40 million, okay. But it's it's everything else that has a limit on it. There seems to be no limit on what we're gonna do for the education of children. But everything else, I think, you know, so I hear what you're saying. I think the hardship is that we have, you know, what's weighing down our capacity is a school. I mean, that's what's eating up the majority of our debt capacity. And the conversations we're having is about another school. You know, what are your thoughts on, if you think about a Turkey Hill renovation costing $30 million, town portion, or 20 million, we don't have any money left over for anything else. So how do we, you know, how do we plan?
So if that is the reality, then we can't. If we choose that Turkey Hill at $30 million is our number one priority, then that's reality.
We haven't chosen that.
No, we haven't. So I think the best way to take it, and I think I've watched some of your meetings. Wasn't able to watch last night. So I don't think it was televised, but on the municipal design committee is, I think you are taking a good approach, is to lay out a holistic plan, get the sense of the town. Do we want option A, option B, option C? It's halfway between B and C. Understand that there's 30 million or whatever the number is over here to the side for Turkey Hill. And then you lay out a budget and a time phasing of that budget in order to do it. I mean, this is how the federal government works. I'm a defense contractor, you know that. And no engineer would not say, here's a blank piece of paper, go design me a weapon system. I mean, that would be nirvana, man. We could do whatever we want, right? But that's not what we have. We have, here's a budget you need to be within. We use techniques like design to cost, design to unit production cost, all these kind of techniques in that process. I think your designers know how to do that. Your architects know how to do that. And then it comes down to really, well, you wanted this as your requirement. If you want this price point, you can have that. But if you want it at your price point, it's going to come in a little, you got to reduce that requirement.
I think what I'm really trying to get to is, given the cost of schools, we're never going to get out of this cycle of building a new one, right? I mean, we're going to be paying for, when do we finish paying off the current school? Because don't we have 2 in the books right now? 2 schools?
2045-ish.
So 2045 is when we finish paying for the middle high school. When do we finish paying for the primary school?
We're almost done
Yeah,
I know we're close.
next year.
24.
I mean, so are we always in this cycle where our debt is just nothing but schools?
So, Mr. Jeffries, let me try to reframe your question. We will always be in this cycle if we don't have clarity in terms of what we can spend, and that we can set expectations for the residents in Lunenburg in terms of where we think we're going. So we don't want the school committee, for example, and I say this as a finance committee member tonight, we don't want the school committee to think today, I don't think, that they have a blank check to go and spend $50 million on a replacement or a renovation of Turkey Hill at the end of the decade. I'm not saying that they have that concept in mind, but there's no guardrails at this point in terms of what's feasible and what's not. We know we have a problem in that school, but we don't know the guardrails that we have in terms of what's feasible to go and address that problem. And we have a very similar situation to the shorter term work that your committee is working on for the municipal building committee. And the problem is that all we have today is an Excel spreadsheet with a declining debt service number on it.
Yep.
And no financial planning, no debt planning to really go around what are some rational ways that we can look at this. I've given you the example personally when we've discussed this. I haven't talked about this publicly, Mr. Jeffries, but I work in the high tech space, and for years and years and years, we used what was called Waterfall Development, which means we would start at the beginning, we would plan a product, we would do the research, we would then build the design plans, we would then build the entire product, we'd market it, launch it, take it to market, and then maybe the product worked, maybe it didn't, and then we'd start over and do something else. And they were long, but you know what the end result was going to be at the very beginning. And along came agile development, this concept of coming up with a minimally viable product and then reacting to the reaction of the market and being much more agile in terms of your development so that you could actually develop something with fewer dollars and less time that the market actually wanted. My reason for describing that to you is I think we need to be more agile, right? I think we need to come up with something that is perhaps different than an 11% cap and a 9% cap and a 4% cap, but something that is much more agile, can show sort of a long-term vision. Yes, we need to deal with municipal offices. Yes, we need to deal with Turkey Hill. Here is a rough estimate of what we have available to deal with this. And if we spend more on a municipal office building, that means we're going to spend less on Turkey Hill and vice versa, potentially, right? Right now, internally, I don't think there's a person that I can go to in town and say, help me model this, because I've tried and I haven't been successful. And that's not to criticize anybody in town. It's just not in our wheelhouse as a town government and our staffing plan to be able to do that kind of work. But I think that that's work that needs to be done. I came here tonight to discuss the fiscal policies as they exist today. And I can tell you, I have no recommendation. I don't have anything that I could tell you, increase the 11%, decrease the 9%, increase the 4%, because the hard analytical work and the dynamic work that needs to be done with the committees to figure out what's really needed and what our capacity is at different dates on the calendar and that sort of thing, it hasn't been done. And the reality is, I think we need external expertise to help us figure that out.
I have two questions on that one for you. So the second question is about that external help. So let me just make that note so I don't forget. All right. The first question is, does it make sense then for us to take another look at that 11% and say we can only, the feeling right now is that it's really, I know I'm saying stuff about schools, right? And schools are it's a very emotional topic for people. Everyone believes that their child is going to be an astronaut. And I'm not saying that that's true, but generally, that everyone sees their kid and they see themselves in their child and a better version of themselves. And they want their kids to have endless opportunities in the future, right? I mean, I can't go to a parent and say, based on statistics, some of your kids are going to be criminals. No one wants to hear that, right? No one wants to hear that. So, I mean, everyone has this hope for their kids, and that's a hope that they're investing in. It's why people buy a home, right? Because you want your kids to have a backyard. It's why people want to live in Lunenburg. That you want your kids to have the experience of living. A lot of what brings people to this town is related to their children, and that's their heart. So. Part of government has to, I wouldn't say our limitation are the emotions of people, but we have to account for the fact that there's going to be a lot of emotions when it comes to children and a lot of willingness to invest in those children, even if it's at the sacrifice of a whole lot of other stuff. And so what I'm wondering then is, do we put limits on how much of our debt capacity goes towards schools? Do we say of that 11%, we're only committing 7.5% to schools? Anything beyond that, we can't afford because the town has other needs. What are your thoughts on that? And I have to comment because I know I'm on television and I said some of your kids could be criminals. And so I have to backtrack off that a little bit, I'm just trying to use that as an illustration.
I can think of a few off the top of my head.
I'll volunteer mine. So, Mr. Jeffrey, I'll say maybe what Mr. Beardmore is saying a little differently. But I think the same sentiment is, I've been in finance a long time and I can look at the debt curves and things, but I do think, some type of a financial planner, consultant could take a look at our debt service schedule, run 5 or 6 scenarios to help us understand what the potential options are and give us some boundaries and limitations around that. Then I think when we know those types of numbers and we are able to grapple with them, and then I think it helps us inform to have a better conversation about different limitations. Like I think what you're saying maybe indirectly is, there's a lot of political support for things to do with the schools. And, as for some of us that are looking at the entire town, it may be harder to get other things passed that folks don't maybe value as enough politically, but that's a separate question. I do think that would help us. And I think we're all feeling that as a committee. I won't talk for everybody here, but I think we're feeling that as a committee, like what are the parameters that we're working within here? How do we help guide committees? How do we at least have some type of a thoughts about what percentages we should be going to different areas as we go forward? I feel like we're a little bit walking, with a flashlight a few feet ahead of us, but we can't see down the road enough to make some really intelligent trade-offs.
I want to throw the town manager in here because I know you have some thoughts.
I just want to add that the financial forecast that we do every year is something where we look at debt capacity. And so that's a slide that is done every year to demonstrate what our capacity is for regular excludable debt and aggregate of the debt. I can go back to the last year's meeting, but I'm pretty sure I said, even though we have this available capacity for debt, as we develop the budget, we have to be cognizant of what that amount is. If we're increasing our regular operating expenses and it's backfilling declining debt, that's going to eat up the capacity. So that's another factor that we have to consider when we're looking at debt and modeling it. What are we giving up in the operating budget for that debt capacity?
So I think that, there's excludable and non-excludable debt, as you're aware. And I think that, where my head has certainly been at for the majority of this discussion is excludable debt, right? So it has a greater bearing on our tax bills than it has on the budget, because it sits outside of the budget for all intents and purposes, although it is governed by policy as a service, as a percentage of the budget. So that it is tied a little bit, but I think that, our concerns, we haven't done a lot of non-excludable debt in the last few years. That's great. We've been in a very good financial position, largely due to your leadership. So, that it isn't really where my focus has been nearly as much as the excludable debt. However, I'm really glad you brought up the financial forecast, because I think that's a really good point, right? In the financial forecast, and I think you've done a great job by bringing in the superintendent and now including the school department portion to really give a holistic view of what our financial picture looks like over the next 5 years. But all we're looking at for debt is what we're spending in debt and what our debt capacity is. The problem is that debt capacity assumes that you're not taking on additional debt, right? So if you have 1% next year and 2% the year after, but then you take on a 1.5%, addition to debt in 18 months from now, that has a cascading effect over the next however long the term of the debt is, right? So our, debt capacity balloons in a few years, but that doesn't really mean a whole lot because we know we're going to need to borrow money. The forecast that you've done over the last several years, and I know it's largely guided by statute, it kind of is what it is, doesn't really forecast the projects we need to do, the excludable debt we need to take on. And that's part of the picture that I think we all think we need to begin to illustrate financially. And unfortunately, we just have not had the capacity to do that.
So to the fellow members on this board, is everyone understanding the distinction that Mr. Beardmore, Mr. Baelish are making with regard to what the town manager prepares every year versus what's being requested? Are you guys all getting what they're asking for? Just want to make sure. Because I'm still partial. So, I just want to see if everyone else is getting it, or if I'm the only one that's like, I don't really understand that.
Benefit from further explanation.
Yeah. So I would defer to the town manager on this, but basically her slide that she just refers to shows the debt capacity, right? Which is, okay, if our debt service next year is 9%, Evan has the numbers right here.
Yep.
If our debt service next year is 9%, and our cap is 11%, then we have a 2% debt capacity, and that will, continue to increase over the next several years because we're not projecting taking on additional debt. It's basically as simple as that.
By way of an analogy, I think the way you can think of it is you have your own personal budget, and you know what you can afford, what your disposable income is. You may say, hey, I want a new car next year. That's kind of what we model day to day, year to year here. But then if you go to a financial planner and you say, I want to retire at the age 55, I want to have the same amount of cash flow that I'm having today. I want to have a second home. These are the variables that financial planners can do for you. And they can do it for you personally, and they can do it for you in a municipality as well. And I think what we need is a financial planner of that second sort to say, here's Vision 2050 for Lunenburg. Right? Here's where we want to be in 25 years. These are our priorities. What's the chances that we can do this? And the other thing that they have at their power is they run Monte Carlos, right? So they run they run it a million times. They say, given situations, worst case, best case, fluctuations, et cetera, how likely are you to get there? These are the kind of things that I think are possible. And I think it's something that we should strive to do. And then based on those results, we lay out, when does Turkey Hill get done? When does Town Hall get done? When do we do whatever we do to the Brooks House? That's the kind of planning I think is necessary.
I guess from my perspective, all the planning in the world is great, but I guess where I'm a little fuzzy in terms of my understanding of municipal debt is, how do you plan for shocks like we've seen this year, where the cost of debt to a municipality is going up exponentially to what it had been doing over the previous 10 or 15 year period. So we can make all the forecasts we want, and then we have a 2-year period where we go, okay, that plan went to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
if this was 2000, how are you planning to 2025? I don't think you'd have the foresight to say, well, there's going to be a recession in 2009 and 8. There's going to be a pandemic in 2019.
No, you wouldn't. But if we were having this conversation in 2000, that financial planner probably would not be forecasting 2% interest blended over 20 years. Right? But that's in fact about what we've had. So yes, there's you can't assume these giant drops and spikes and valleys, but you can assume a blended average. We had crazy inflation in the early 80s as well, and dealt with, my cousin bought a house in Lunenburg and paid a 19% mortgage in the early 80s. But, the blended average over the last 50 years has sat somewhere around, 4%, 5%. So, but that's not a reason to not do financial planning, in my opinion.
What are your thoughts when I suggested earlier, which is taking that 11% and putting a cap on how much of that can be committed towards schools? So that way we constantly build ourselves in capacity for things other than schools. Because we hit this max on schools.
With all due respect, Mr. Jeffries, I think that would, equate to trying to drive a car blindfolded. I think that you're looking to apply policy without the necessary context that your finance committee is telling you, we need additional context. That may be a point that we get to 6 or 8 months down the road after that analysis has happened. But at this point, I think that that's, that would be, I understand the intent, but I think that it would be, we could do it with a much greater degree of precision and foresight and sensitivity if we did it with the additional context and analysis that we've been speaking about.
I think that when we look at it from like what we've borrowed money for, right? And we think about the public safety building and what that cost us. I think it was what, $2 million when it was built. And then I think the library was about $1 million when we built the library 20 years ago. I thought it may have been 1.4.
The library was 4.
And then the library is more money. But most of this money is, and I think, I don't get too sidetracked. I think the hardship as I see it is how do we, when we're having a conversation about municipal buildings, one of the first things that we hear is, well, what about Turkey Hill? Right? Because it seems to be a foregone conclusion for many people that we're building a new school. That's foregone. It's going to happen. So that's a priority. But I guess, how do we have a policy that safeguards and says we need to reserve some of this capacity for non-school related things? Because when we go backwards in time, it has been historically, if we look at the last 40 years and the debt the town has taken on in the last 40 years, most of it's schools.
Mr. Jeffries, you're making a political argument. We're trying to have a financial discussion here.
I'm not making a political
I think
argument.
you are. I think that you're trying to make a point against, future spending on schools versus municipal spending. And we're trying to have a discussion about, what can give us the best tools to make the best informed decisions for the town and our long-term fiscal health. Those are the decisions that we're looking to make. I don't think that the finance committee is in a position to recommend, where we should be spending our debt or where we shouldn't be spending our debt. It's, do we have the capacity or not? And how can we engineer things to get to where we as a community want to be? By the way, this is a select board policy that we're talking about,
Yeah.
These caps. This is not your decision. The decision to borrow money is a town decision. It has to be voted by town meeting. It's a legislative decision and a decision of the voters. So ultimately, this policy is good guidance for the finance committee to analyze the proposals that are brought forth, give guidance for new proposals that come about. But ultimately, these are the decisions for the voters to make. And we want to be able to advise the voters whether or not it fits within the guidelines of good fiscal practice or not. It's really as simple as that.
I think, Mr. Beermore, what I'm trying to impress upon the committee is when we know that we have our most expensive thing that we can do as a municipality is always build a building. That's always the most expensive thing we can do. We know that we're in an environment where we're told that the average school is only going to last for 60 years, that we will always be in a position foreseeable in which we're going to have school debt on the books, period. I mean, that's just a reality. And what I'm trying to figure out is, based on your experience, if you think that there needs to be on our side a limit on that. That seems to be the one area where we are continuing to invest as a community is into our education, which is unnecessary. And I don't plan on running for any more offices. This is hopefully my last term. I'll say that now. So I'm not looking to score any political points with anyone. I'm trying to understand, how we can ever get to a situation where we're paying for things other than schools. And is it because, do we need to, as by policy, say something about it, that, maybe we only commit 8%, maybe it's 9% as a general guidance, that we need to make sure that we preserve some capacity for things that are not schools.
Mr. Jeffries, but I think that Mr. Beardmore is saying that we might be able to plan better if we have a financial planner come and look at this, and then we'll know how much we can spend on schools. And then we can separate it at that point. I think that's what you're trying to say.
I'm saying we need to make better informed decisions.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's
And
really.
then
as
we
simple
will
as that.
know, okay, so with this financial planner come in and say, okay, this is what you have to spend. What are your top priorities? And so if you want to do Turkey Hill, your cap is this, so it'll just be the roof and not a new building. And then you go over to TC Passios. Is that going to be the new town hall? If it is, this is what you have to spend. Like your house, like you're doing a kitchen, you go in and you meet and they say, guess what? That $60,000 kitchen that you wanted is $100,000. So you have to cut things out. But if you have a planner, like a lot of people do at home, then you're allowed, you can manage those funds better. And then you can get more projects in based on that planning. We have no projects in. And I think that a lot of the people in town are getting tired of looking at no projects getting done. I know I am. I've been here 18 years looking at the same projects and I'd like to see something get done. Not just a school building though. So I would like to see somebody come in and tell us how we could maneuver any project at all, please.
Another way to look at this potentially is also like, you know, by the way, I'm comfortable with the money we spent on the middle high school. I went to that meeting and there wasn't a discussion. There was a great discussion about the need that we have and the money that the state's going to bring to us when we build that building. There wasn't a discussion about the fiscal health of Lunenburg and our debt capacity. Why? Because we didn't do the analysis and we are where we are today, partially because of that. Now, again, I'm comfortable with those numbers and the money we spent when we spent it. I voted for it. I'd vote for it again. But that is what put us in the exact same situation that you were describing, Mr. Jeffries, right? So instead of repeating the sins of the past, let's go at this with clearer context, better understanding of what our financial situation is and will likely be in the future. And also, back to the political discussion, if you believe that you're going to say we're going to cap this at 60 or 70% and then go and spend your 30 on municipal buildings, and it's very clear that Turkey Hill is never going to be dealt with, that will fail as well. I guarantee you that that will fail as well. So this needs to be a plan that is for all of Lunenburg, not any particular, special interest.
So if I can make one more comment, I think maybe as I listen to the discussion, at least what I have conceived here is not some big extensive financial study that's going to take 6 months and, I think this is the type of thing that, municipal debt, investment banks and financial planners, they do this stuff all the time. And I think they could probably whip out a few scenarios, in a few weeks and with very minimal, I think minimal cost. I don't know. I haven't priced anything out, certainly. But if we have those relationships already or bankers or whatever, I just don't think this is a very exhaustive type of exercise. I think it's a pretty, and we can get, we could get quotes, we could get that sort of thing if that's the concern. But I just think if we come with a document that lays out that type of capacity that we have, then I think the types of discussion that you're talking about just become so much easier and we have a frame around it. And yes, things can happen. Interest rates can go up, they can go down, et cetera, but at least we have a good, set of, guardrails around the way that we think about planning for the future.
To the town manager, are you pretty clear on what they're suggesting?
I think I need a one-on-one with a member of the board that really, because I think that's what our financial forecast has the capability of doing, is modeling those and putting in scenarios of debt capacity. It's just knowing, what to plug in where and keeping the assumptions continuous throughout those years. Because we need a foundation of which to build that scenario on.
So perhaps on this one, maybe the next step, because I think I understand what's being asked. I'm still a little fuzzy, even after hearing this. I think that I think by you guys having so many meetings about this, that I think you have a pretty clear vision of what it is that you're looking for, what it is that you think is missing, and it's perhaps not as clear to me. And so maybe there needs to be that follow-up discussion or kind of written proposal of what it is that you're recommending. And I certainly would expect there to be support for it.
The one other quick thing though, Heather brought up, town manager brought up a good point about the schools and the operating, the operating budget, right? And I think that's something important for school committee to even think about, is because we can have the best schools in the world, but if we can't put teachers in them and the class sizes are 40-1 and, you know, we can't bus students, then I'd prefer to do like I did personally. And we sent our son to a school that was, you know, was pretty lousy looking from the outside and the inside, but it met his education needs. So got to stop thinking of the school as the schoolhouse, you know, and more as the school as the teachers, and they happen to be in a school. So it's a good discussion to get us a sense of where the priorities of the parents are. So.
All right, and I'm probably a little more willing to, I know that I've been misinterpreted several times as being anti-school, which is not at all how I feel. You know, I graduated from Lunenburg High. I think something I say all the time, I think Lunenburg produces some of the best people around. And I think, when we look at the class of graduates, Mr. Beardmore being one of them, I think it really is outstanding. I really do. I really think Lunenburg does a great job with children. So I'm not anti-school. My attitude is really about how we get to an area fiscally where we can do something other than just schools, because it seems as if we can build consensus politically around schools, but we don't have policies that allow us to do other things. And so like, do we, and I think there's probably more conversation to be had, I think internally on this board, as there's always the political reality, but then there's also the policy proposals that come forward. And how do we structure ourselves in a way that we can do something other than just keep building new schools while we're in a town hall that, is 150, 60 years old and have, buildings that have all these real needs, but, it's hard for people to understand when they drive by. And someone said to me, town hall looks fine. I drive by the building all the time. It looks okay. So does Ritter. And it's like, well, I don't think anyone working in these buildings would concur. But the last thing on our agenda today is select board. We had Article 3 financials. So we went over debt capacity. We talked about the select board policies and procedures. We talked about the proposed bylaw. So it looks like we've hit all of our topics, but I want to generally give you guys the opportunity, since you're here with us, to talk to us about what is it that we need to do better to be more supportive of your function in any kind of way. So this is an open-ended question.
We need 2 members.
Announcement later on.
You need more members. All right.
I don't feel unsupported in any way, shape, or form. I think that questions that I ask of town manager and the finance director, typically is less than a 24-hour turnaround. When Karen's on vacation and I send her an email, I immediately get sometimes she'll reply on vacation. If not, it'll be her first day back. And, I think we get excellent support. And I say that as a past chair. Ideally, I would have more staff to be able to staff our meetings. We can't have Heather at every meeting. It's just not feasible. There aren't more than 24 hours in her day, and she has a life as well. And I think we get reasonable support very good support from her. In fact, I think if I were to request something, I would say, to the members of the select board is to do this more frequently. This is the first time we've had this conversation in the last 3 years that I've been on the finance committee. We've had a couple of other things that were similar, but not exactly. I think this was a great conversation we had tonight. Should be a regular thing, probably annually. But then I would also encourage you to watch the finance committee meetings and stay informed. And, because particularly during budget season, I know you get regular updates from the town manager, but the questions that we ask and the context and, you know, some of the issues that evolve, she's very responsive during the budget process to adjusting and, you know, visualizing those changes and all those kinds of things. The more you're up on that, the better we'll all be for it come recommendations on the warrant and discussions at town meeting. And, you know, I think over the last 3 years, I think some select board members have been very engaged in the financial side of the house, and other members, you know, were not. And, you know, ideally, I'd like all the members to be, you know, very well read into the financial side of the house.
Any other thoughts, recommendations as you see it for us, how we can work better together, things that we can do to be more supportive? Any questions? Yes.
Well, why don't we flip that question?
Yeah, good question.
I was about to. All right, so to the board, are there any comments, questions to the finance committee about how we can work better together?
Who's our finance committee liaison? Is it Tom?
He's not here.
Does he attend your meetings or just watch them later?
Mostly Zoom.
Yeah, okay.
My only comment is I agree with Mr. Beardmore. I think this sort of dialogue between the finance committee and select board is valuable. This is the first one in my memory and in my 2+ years on this board. And I think it's helps bring the issues that you guys are seeing directly to us. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I encourage the chair to push these sorts of meetings more often.
I previously stated my, views on the importance of the finance committee. I previously had said, while it doesn't have binding authority, it has extreme persuasive authority. So appreciate the work you do, and it's absolutely critical. I like the idea of more dialogue. I always like that. So I'll concur with that point. And, yeah, I mean, I'm not a bi-weekly, I watch select finance committee meetings. I don't watch every finance committee meeting, especially when the topics get meaty. That's when I watch, or when it's time to see what the finance committee's views on certain warrant articles. I certainly watch those meetings, but I might need a double espresso for anything more.
Touche.
Being a member of the board for 3 years, there were a lot of things that came to my mind about what I thought we should do. And so, part of my role as chairs, I understand that we all have different strengths. And so everyone comes to the plate with different strengths. I strongly believe in collaboration. And so, something I've started is, since becoming chair is having a lot of joint meetings with other boards and committees, because it's important. I wanted to have this one now before we go into the financial, before we even start the process. So that way, if there's changes that we need to make, that we can make them. Sitting up here, I don't believe that I have the answers to everything. I think that there's a lot of years of education and skills sitting in this room amongst us. And I think the challenge of leadership is how you tap into all that to get to a product that's good for everyone else. That sometimes you have to say things that are bold, that people may not want to hear. But so long as we're all honest, we can get into the place we want to be. I don't doubt that there's a lot of passion and love. I've watched several of your meetings. So I do have some, my feedback would be a couple of things. I think there's no doubt that all of us here are here because we care about the town of Lunenburg, the residents. We know that we have something to offer. I know how much time it is. And I really do thank you guys, as well as my colleagues, for how much time, everyone's putting in. I think that at the meetings, something I've said to the town manager in our conversations, that I think it would be best if her attendance was scheduled. I think sometimes, especially when we get into some of the meetings that happen in the dead of winter, that they get really lengthy and really long, which is okay, but I'm also mindful that we're an employer. And so it's a little bit different when you're a volunteering at night versus when you're a mom and you have children. And so I want us to be just mindful of the town manager being an employee of the town who does have a family and whose normal hours are during the day. And so with the meetings, I would encourage, as you guys go into this cycle, that, you know, the town manager has I think never expressed any hesitance about being at the meetings, but I would urge that there may need to be some more limits. Or does she need to be at every meeting? You know, can she be front loaded at your meetings so that way she's there for the first 90 minutes only? That's one thing I would ask. Otherwise, I think that you guys are really diligent with what you're doing. You're very thorough. It sounds as if you're understanding that staff may not immediately be able to create new products that they don't need in the performance of their jobs. That does become challenging, I know, especially during the budgeting process. When staff are creating new products that they don't need, that there may be another way to get the information that you need, or send a communication to the select board about what your needs are that are above and beyond what staff normally do. So that way we can endorse that or not, but generally that way we can endorse that, really, because I think that that's also, we see the stress levels of all of our staff when we get into the budget season, and they're all working long hours. And in talking with them, of course, I think, of course, there's this feeling of, yeah, I have to give this to the finance committee, and there's this willingness to. I don't have a problem with most of it, but like I said, if you find that you're asking for something that employees telling you that they don't do, that you send that request through the select board for it to be met. So that way we don't run into any challenges. But that's all. Otherwise, I think you guys are very outspoken. You know, I think I had a conversation, I'll share it with Mr. Menard and Mr. Beardmore maybe a year or so ago. I think you guys do walk a fine line sometimes when it comes to consent, or at least advise versus perhaps guide. I think that there is sometimes a fine line, but I think it's a fine line. I'll leave it at that. And I think it's important. I know something you said to me, Peter, was that it's important for there to be that fine line. And so continuing to maintain some balance between, you know, the guiding versus the, you know, ability just to advise town meeting, because just like our voice, your voice is equally important. People really do look to you, just like they look to us for opinions and guidance. They assume that you guys are in the thick of all this, and certainly more than us. We need to communicate more. You know, one of the things that's come up is we don't meet with all the different boards and committees that have capital plans. We don't meet with them, just like we haven't been meeting really with a lot of people who submit warrant articles. It's just if we have questions. And I think that we have to be a little more communicative on our end, that we need to not be afraid of meetings that sometimes go to 8:30 for one topic. That sometimes this is a long business, and if we have to amend meetings and shorten things, then, you know, we have to do it. But I really appreciate the work you guys are doing on behalf of the residents of Lunenburg, and I just want to thank you guys for that. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right, without any other comments, I will give you time to adjourn your meeting or say any final comments, and then adjourn your meeting. We'll go forward with the agenda.
Any other comments? before we adjourn?
I do have a comment.
Yes.
I just want to thank Mr. Beardmore for sitting on the finance committee for so long.
Oh,
How many,
it's been a while.
you have only a few more weeks?
I have 10 days.
10 days.
Who's that?
And
Who's
then
counting?
you're all totally school committee.
I will be. Yes.
Okay, thank you for serving on that committee as well.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure.
We're happy to hear you still in town.
I'm
It's
sure.
good. You're very vocal.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's been very, I think, helpful for us and hopefully helpful for the town as well. And I certainly look forward to more dialogue and discourse amongst a whole host of other topics as well. With that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are unanimous at 8:38 PM.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Let's go straight to the town manager's report.
Before we that, but it relates to the town manager's report.
Yeah.
Is Sarah Kammer. She was a member of the Open Space Committee. She resigned from the committee, so now there's a vacancy for the member at large position. on open space. So that's just under resignations. I'll start with the announcement of existing vacancies. There are 2 vacancies on the Finance Committee.
And that includes Mr. Beardmore's, right?
Yes.
Yes, that includes Mr. Beardmore's at the end of this month, but they've both been advertised. There are 2 associate vacancies on the Green Communities Committee, 1 vacancy on the Historical Commission, 1 member at large vacancy mentioned on the Open Space Committee, and a Planning Board vacancy, which is a joint appointment between the Planning Board and the Select Board until the next annual town election, and 1 associate vacancy on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Anyone interested in serving on any of these committees and boards can fill out the application form found on the town website, complete it, return it to the Select Board's office. And if you have questions on any of the roles and responsibilities of these positions, you can contact our office at 978-582-4130, extension 144. For current employment opportunities with the town, the following is a list of those opportunities. There is an administrative assistant, which is IT related. This is the position that was created at the town meeting for it to be the webmaster basically position, but also do administrative work, processing invoices for IT. That's a part-time non-benefited position. Public safety front desk clerk, which is a full-time benefited position. The library assistant position is a part-time non-benefited position. Police officer, which is a full-time benefited position. Tax collector principal clerk, which is a full-time benefited position. Production technician for public access, which is a part-time benefited position. Van driver for the Council on Aging is a part-time non-benefited position. And videographers for public access is a part-time non-benefited position. Information on these job postings can be found on the town website as well under employment opportunities. An update on traffic line painting and sidewalks. So unfortunately, as announced last week, the contractor did not show up as he said he would, or the company said they would last week, and now is relaying to the DPW director that it will occur the week of October 2nd. PJ Keating is tentatively scheduled to make repairs to the sidewalk on Lancaster Ave from Whiting Street to Rolling Acres on September 27th. And lastly, the DPW director attended an informational meeting on safe routes to schools in August and hopes to apply for this grant funding next year in a joint effort with the schools and DPW and town departments. And also will participate in a planned walk around for the proximity of the roads within school distance related to sidewalks to see about sidewalk viability in those areas.
I have 2 comments for you.
Okay.
Or 1 comment and question. So I did speak with Carol Archambault, chair of the school committee, just to clarify their request to see if they're looking for 1.5 miles from the school or half a mile. And her clarification was half a mile would be ideal. All right.
They assume they'll be submitting that request through the ARPA form that was sent to everyone.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And then the
I
second,
expect that they will, because I got a question about submittal.
and then the second question is right in front of town hall. You know, every time it rains, there's a nice little flood right near the handicap ramp. Is that being looked into?
I can ask the DPW director.
All right.
What handicap ramp? There's no handicap spot.
So, you know,
It would be painted.
It's not painted
It'd be to
yet,
the
so it's
right.
not handicap yet.
well, you have the plate on the sidewalk, the handicap plate, or the, you know, for
Agreed.
people who are.
I know.
All right.
Just pointing it out.
I know. All right. That's all I had.
Did she say really half a mile?
Yes.
Oh.
Yep. Yep.
Are they gonna correct their,
The letter doesn't specify.
no, but I mean, are they going to, update their policy then to clearly state just the half a mile walking?
No, I don't think that
It says 1.5 miles right in the policy.
the policy the policy for the school committee does say that they bus beyond 1.5 miles. I think that I wanted clarification on what they were asking for, and if it was a half mile or they're actually asking for a mile and a half. She said a half mile, whatever they can
Well, what
get.
is that gonna do?
I'm not willing, I mean, we can talk about it when the request comes through, but I'm not gonna
Okay.
double down on what I think is a
Okay.
crappy policy.
Okay, just,
So,
I just don't understand that. If the
Yeah.
policy says a mile and a half.
yeah, why would we pursue a
Right.
mile and a half of sidewalks is beyond me, but I definitely would be interested in half
Okay.
a mile.
I'm just, makes no sense.
Great. Next update is about the streetlights. The closing did occur last Thursday.
Great.
And so we were the official owners of the streetlights. The DPW director has put up on the town website as far as information on how to request repairs to streetlights that will be directed to the DPW. It was also posted on the Facebook account as well. So people can submit either by calling the DPW or they have an online form that can be filled out as well. Related to that as well, the Green Communities Committee is currently working on a request for proposals for design and installation of the LED streetlights, and that the hope is to have that draft done for the assistant town manager and I to review shortly. An update on the Ritter Break Room project. The students from Monty Tech began the Ritter Break Room project last week, but there has been a pause in the project due to revealing a water leak that stems from a possible water infiltration from a crack in the foundation. So the facilities director is working with the DPW to excavate it will occur at a future date. I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow, but everyone should be aware if they see equipment there, we'll be excavating an area near the foundation to see the cause. And Monty Tech has also offered from their masonry department to repair that when the inspection is done. So right now that project is on hold. ARPA funds, the Division of Local Services issued a notification that we'll receive our last allotment of the ARPA funding. This is the county allotment. So we received the full town appropriation. If you remember, there were two portions. There was a town, and then a later date, the US Treasury made a decision on the county allotments, which come through the state. So we have received half of that county allotment already, and this is just the remaining other half of that county allotment. So we will have the full funding available by the end of this month, or September 23rd, actually, is the date that the Division of Local Services said that we would receive it on or about. And that means that when the prioritization plan for commitment of those funds is finalized, those funds will be available for use. You know, that's was some of the feedback when I sent out that the ARPA funding requests is were there time restrictions on the funding source. Update on the fiscal 24 capital planning process. Departments were sent the information necessary to complete any capital requests for fiscal 24 through fiscal 23. And submissions are due back on October 13th.
Fiscal 24 through fiscal 23.
Sorry, 33. Did I say 23? Sorry, 33.
I wasn't sure which one was right.
10 years. The Capital Planning Committee meets Monday, September 26th at 5 p.m. to reorganize due to a change in membership and also to review the capital planning schedule. And that meeting is Zoom. Through Zoom. So.
All right.
Fraud risk assessments, as previously reported, due to one of the remaining comments in our audit letter, that's the only management comment that we haven't done, has begun. So we had our kickoff meeting last week, the finance director and I, with the firm that will be doing the fraud risk assessment. And we provided all the contact list information for all the personnel that will need to fill out questionnaires on processes. And once, so they'll review all those questionnaires, submit back to the town a report on their assessment of any areas where we have areas of risk. and their recommendations on how to alleviate those and minimize those. So that should be completed within the next couple of months. Legislative update, the legislature is revisiting the economic development bill now that the 1986 tax relief law known as Chapter 62F, which will return more than 2.9 billion back to taxpayers via checks and direct deposits, has been finalized as far as that outcome. There was some question of how that was going to play out. I reached out to Representative Kushmerik's office regarding House Bill 3727 on the library trust funds, and this bill was signed by the governor on August 24th and is titled Chapter 189 of the Acts of 2022. And I did inform the Library Board of Trustees Chair and the Library Director of this as well. I sent an email to all three of our legislators regarding the status of the funding for Lunenburg and Economic Development Bill and asking if we should be requesting funds in the supplemental budget bill that they're currently reviewing now for the fall.
Do you ever hear from Representative Sina?
His legislative aide is very responsive, but actually he just submitted a resignation. He's moving on to another position with another entity.
Okay.
So.
But actual Representative Sina, do you ever hear from him?
Directly, usually not,
No.
but most of the time I do only hear from aides.
Okay.
Yeah. Meetings, events, and other announcements. The fall yard waste days will be at the old landfill off of Youngs Road from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on the following Saturdays, October 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th, and November 5th, 12th, and 19th. This is open to Lunenburg residents only. The Zoning Board of Appeals will be having the next hearing on Pondview Commons, the 40B comprehensive permit application, on October 12th at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall meeting room, and this is a hybrid meeting.
Excellent.
The Neshoba Associated Boards of Health will be holding a flu clinic at the Lunenburg Library on October 3rd from 3 to 5 p.m. for all ages. Pre-registration is required, and more information can be found on the Lunenburg Board of Health webpage. The Lunenburg Business Association is doing the trunk or treat event, and that tentative, or actual date, I'm going to change this again, is Sunday, October 30th from 12 to 3 p.m. at the Lunenburg High School upper parking lot. The last farmers market will be this Sunday, September 25th, and the Historical Society building is open during the farmers market hours. And lastly, the special town meeting is November 15th at 7 p.m. at the middle school, high school auditorium.
And thank you for the town manager's report, as always.
Welcome.
Looking at the agenda tonight, I'm just gonna go through this real quick. We're gonna reschedule our discussion within the workshop of number 3. And then we're also going to in old business. I think we need to push off number 1 and number 2. So that way we're not here till 11 o'clock tonight. Looking at so we have a workshop scheduled for tonight. I know it's 9 o'clock as we're starting this, so this is going to be a pretty quick one. So within our workshop tonight, there's 2 things that we are going to discuss. I just noted that we're going to discuss environmental policies at another meeting, only because it's already 9 o'clock. So for the appointment policy, so this should be in the Google Drive for tonight.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say, as usual, the standing operating procedures, if there's anything you want me to read, I will read it.
Okay. All right. So we're going to start with the, make sure I'm in the right month here. I am. Okay. I don't see the,
There's just an appointments folder,
yeah, I'm looking in the folder.
but I don't see the policy. in
I
there.
don't see
The Word
policy
document?
there.
Yeah, it's a
Section
Word document.
2.07.
It's under.
Oh, it is the Word
It's
document.
in a folder.
Oh, she
yeah.
converted it to Word.
Yeah.
It's the Word document.
Oh, this is, hold on. I'm talking the one that I proposed. I don't see it in here.
The volunteer applications.
Nope, there was the whole policy.
Appointments? Oh,
Yes.
you're one, oh yeah, with the,
Yeah, the whole policy.
yeah,
Mr. Chair,
I
I don't
noticed
see any.
with the term limits.
2 weeks ago.
You weren't
We
here.
had talked about that.
Mm,
Let me find it.
It'll be, but, six.
Other person.
Maybe it's in that.
Yeah, let me find it. It was the 7th. I want to forward it to you again. What do you got?
I was looking.
We're just pulling this up.
Yeah. I know, this is because we couldn't read it beforehand, remember?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. Mhm. You re-forward that.
I will. So it's just at the top of your box.
Yeah.
Sending you two. So there's a clean and there's a marked up version.
Is it coming? For the drive? Is it in the drive?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
I see your emails coming in. We'll be there shortly. So I'll talk to it while Heather's adding this into the drive. So what the policy does is at our last meeting, when we last discussed this in detail in the middle of August. So I took the existing policy and then I did a tracked version, but it's not truly. So I rearranged several sections. I tried to, I don't demonstrate in the tracked version what I rearranged, but it just shows the language.
Well, then it's not tracked.
I know, so it's not quite, that's what I'm saying. It's a little out of order, but it shows the initial language. It shows all my modifications to the language, everything I deleted, everything I added, and where I added it. And then there's the clean version, which is what I wanted to review tonight, which is the final document. So we had talked about breaking it down into sections of having an appointment process, a reappointment process. So once we get this in the drive, we'll go ahead and pull this up and we can talk through it a little more.
You sure it's not the one that's in there? Looks the same when I open it.
Did I, the one that says clean? It should have been a PDF.
Mhm.
Looks like this. It's not.
Yeah.
All right, while we are doing that, why don't we go to the next section of the agenda, which is regulatory. So this is Select Board Policies and Procedures, Article 4, which is regulatory. So this is in our drive. Tonight, Article 4 regulatory, and then yeah, all right. So this is a quick walkthrough of all of Article 4, which is all of our regulatory policies, starting with liquor licenses in section 4.01. And this just details exactly, who the licensing authority is, which is the select board, et cetera. It goes into so this is just details of how we're doing it, hours of operations, physical premises. It's I think we've spent a lot of time on this policy. My opinion is it's a good one. But are there any questions, anything that we want to specifically review within section 1 as it relates to alcohol? All right. 4.02 gets into bring your own bottle. Anything we want to discuss, and as we get into 4.02 BYOB. All right, 4.03 discusses one-day liquor licenses. And is there anything we want to pause on with that? All right. 4.04. So earth removal permits. All that we have is basically saying that earth removal permits will be issued in accordance with the earth removal ordinance, Article 9, Section 9 of the town bylaws, which is a very minimal, that's it, which is a very minimal bylaw. So this is something that the planning board took on last year. A previous board thought that that earth removal should not be the purview of the select board, that might be a planning board function instead. There was interest in moving it over to the planning board. The planning board took lead in putting together some bylaws. That bylaw was defeated at town meeting. And so what we have is we have a process now, as we went through it in August. I know I wasn't here for it, where this board still continues to approve earth removal permits. We have a very low threshold. The reality, I think, is that it's probably not being followed. There's probably a lot of earth removal going on all the time. I believe the threshold right now is 10 yards, which no one's coming to us for 10 yards. People are coming to us for much more than that. It's just too low of a threshold. There wasn't much of an appetite in a previous board to reevaluate 4.04. Is this something that we want to take up? And I will be honest in saying I was part of the majority that did not want to take this back up. But do we want to take on earth removal permits and kind of look at the guide that came from the planning board and see how we can modify it? Or are we okay with the process we just went through in August?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if I necessarily agree with your contention that the existing bylaw isn't being adhered to. I don't think we have any evidence to or for or against that statement. And I think it's silly to make a statement if you don't have evidence for it. If it's you're feeling great, but without backing it up, it's just a feeling. And in terms of, the earth removal permit, I tend to agree with you that I don't really have an appetite to take it up. I don't think that the procedure we're using right now is particularly onerous. And so I don't really have an appetite to change it.
I've personally observed, I can't even count how many truckloads at multiple different sites removing soil with no permit at different locations in town.
Well, I guess the point of removing, is that part of a permanent building project that they're removing, or they're removing soil at sites to sell?
I don't know if it was being sold. I know that there was no construction going on at either one of those locations.
Okay.
So I'm personally familiar with violations of our earth removal permitting process. But I understand what you're saying, and I have not been forthcoming to be willing to, I hear you.
Well, if we change the policy, is that going to make a difference? Can we just add a period to it?
All right, so sounds like 4.05 circus permits.
Can we add a period to the end of the sentence at least?
Period at the end of the sentence. 4.04.
Thank you.
Circus permits. All right, peddler licenses.
Peddler.
Yeah, and then public entertainment license. Okay, if we go back into our appointments folder, we will see the, where is it at?
Appointment policy.
I need to refresh.
Oh,
Is it just in the, put in the appointments folder?
Again.
Nope.
wait, is it not in there?
In my folder.
There is another a document has been added.
We
I
can,
want me to.
can you
Where
hit,
it?
can you hit the refresh button?
Well, now there are two copy of, so there's one that now says copy of section 2.07.
Yeah, it's not it. It's not in the folder
right.
itself right now.
Okay.
I can see it in Heather's Drive. It's located right below agenda.
Yep.
And do you have a clean version?
No.
We
send me
don't
one
have
up
it. Do you
there.
have it?
Yeah, they look like they have this.
Even refreshing it, I don't think I can cancel. I've done
Can we use the tracked version and I'll just share it on the screen?
Say again?
Can we use the tracked version
Yeah.
and I'll share it?
Sure. Heather's gonna share this on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Come on.
And this is the tracked version.
The semi-tracked version.
With some rearranging. All right, can we all see this okay?
Not really,
Well, I
but-
can't see it to read it.
Not really.
If you're looking at me for me to read it, I can't do it.
Yeah,
No,
Do you
no,
wanna read
I can
mine?
read, I can read that far.
I can't. read
The only thing in the way is your bubble.
Pack has to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Pac. So starting with number one, volunteer applications. So the blue identifies the additional verbiage. The strikeouts are what was changed. And so how this reads now is the town manager will ensure the availability of up-to-date volunteer applications in town hall, other town buildings, and on the town's website. She or he will also ensure that completed volunteer applications are maintained in an organized and easily retrievable manner, that receipt of the completed application is acknowledged, and that the resident who submits, I see an error here, applications to be given a sense and copy of the appointment process. As board appointed vacancies occur, the town manager will ensure that local newspapers are advised of the vacancies and that vacancy notices are posted on the town bulletin boards and advertised on the town's website and local cable television channel. The vacancy shall also be advertised on the town's bulletin board for no less than 14 days, and this was a change from 10 per section 7-10 of the town charter. As practice, the board shall appoint on or after the 21st day following the posting of a vacancy. So the additions here were really about changing the names from talent bank form to volunteer application, increasing the days we have to post from 10 to 14 to be consistent with the charter, and then noting that as practice that we will appoint on or after the 21st day. And what that allows is that allows for a vacancy to exist for at least 2 full weeks before we actually put someone in the role. And that way we're not appointing on the last day. Can you scroll to appointments?
Just a question on, that's, I believe the charter still reads 10 days. For the posting of vacancies.
I looked it up.
Yeah.
We can pull it up. You want to just double check me then, 7-10? Appointments.
Sure, do you
Yes.
prefer that we wait until the very end before raising issues, or what reason as we go?
Whatever you prefer.
If we can go back to that for a second where we say.
It may make sense to go through it once and then
Alright.
go back,
Okay,
just that we get
Either
the
way.
full picture. But if you want to,
I'll forget my point by then.
Yeah.
Just let him, what is it?
Well, you say that your objective is to have it be posted for 2 weeks, right? 2
Yes.
full weeks. So I don't know that we necessarily have to wait until the 21st day to make the appointment. It should be perhaps the meeting next following the 14th day. So it could be 16 days after posting.
I think I was intentionally, my intent was deliberately to push that out to 3 weeks, was to
Alright.
go beyond what the charter requires. So that way we're doing the most we can to help encourage people
People
to
to,
volunteer.
yeah.
Okay.
I thought we talked about that.
As long as that's, you're capturing the intent, that's all I'm saying.
I believe you, but I thought I read.
Posting for no less than 10, but the appointment. can't be
14.
fixed. Yeah.
Got it. So we'll change that back.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to scroll to appointments. All right, so subject to applicable state laws, and again, we can see the blue that's been changed here, and I'm not sure why that's highlighted down there. Okay, all right. Subject to applicable state law and the town charter, the board shall make its annual appointments at the first and second regular meetings in June. Appointments made at those meetings shall have terms beginning on July the 1st and expiring on June the 30th. In addition, as the need arises, the board may make appointments throughout the year for terms to take immediate effect with expiration dates of June 30th. Terms shall not exceed 3 years unless specifically allowed by the Massachusetts general law. Appointments shall be based on merit and qualifications that relate to the duties of the subject board, committee, or position. Where possible, the board will seek variety in backgrounds, interest, ages, genders, and geographic areas of town, so that multi-member bodies will reflect, reflect a true cross-section of the community. In order to attract qualified and interested persons, the town manager will provide a list of vacancies to the board by March the 15th and employ a multimedia strategy by April the 1st to advertise all vacancies. The town manager will ensure that the select board receive with its board material for the first and second meetings in June, a list of appointments to be filled by the board that includes all applicants with notations for those seeking reappointment. The board shall conduct interviews when there are multiple applicants for a vacancy. Members may also request before May 25th for all applicants to an identified board or committee to have scheduled interviews. For reappointments, and there's a lot of changes here, so I need to read it on your screen. Reappointment shall not be automatic, but the select board will consider the appointees' contributions and the role into which they are seeking reappointment. As part of the annual appointment process, the town manager will ask incumbents whose terms will expire on June 30th to complete and return a reappointment application by April the 30th. By May the 10th, the town manager's office will forward the reappointment application to the other members of the multi-member body of which a resident is seeking appointment and request their review and response related to the reappointment of the person prior to June the 1st. The board will review and consider such comments. When the board conducts interviews for vacancies, the board shall interview applicants seeking reappointment with all others seeking appointment. Ad hoc committee, I did not make any changes really to this section. I just extracted this, but I'll read it. So the board may from time to time appoint standing or advisory committees to aid on matters under the board's jurisdiction. The use of such committees provides greater expertise and more widespread citizen participation in the operation of government. The board will give each advisory committee a written charge, which shall include the work to be undertaken, the time in which it is to be accomplished, and the procedures for reporting to the select board. The board will discharge committees upon completion of their work. The charges and membership of advisory committees shall be reviewed at least annually to assess the necessity and desirability of continuing the committee. The exclusion that the policy does not apply to reappointments made to an elected board vacancy that is done jointly with the select board and the board that has the vacancy. And then I've added in this entire section section 6, which is guidance for appointed officials. And this is my recommendation to the board to add this in. Swear in, some of this language is already there, that appointees must contact the town manager to be sworn in and provided with information on the open meeting and conflict of interest laws. But then we have the rest of this, and I'll just read through this. So learn. All appointees should familiarize themselves with the policies and procedures of the select board, with attention to the procedural and operational policies identified in Articles 1 and 2. Appointees should also familiarize, and I see that I'm missing an eyes there, themselves with the town charter and all applicable bylaws and regulations related to the body of which they are a member. Robert's Rules of Order help inform general parliamentary procedure, though multi-member bodies may employ a myriad of modifications. Collaborate. Service to the town in an appointed position of trust requires collaborative and honest work and an environment that encourages diversity of viewpoint and perspective. All who serve have a duty to exhibit the highest standards of interpersonal decency. That's my own phrase, by the way, interpersonal decency, and demonstrate respect and consideration for others while in the performance of their duties. Agendas and minutes. All multi-member bodies appointed by the board, all multi-member bodies appointed by the board shall ensure that all agendas and minutes are submitted to the town clerk for posting on the town's website and comply with all other open meeting posting requirements. Bodies that require assistance with minute taking should contact the town manager's office for staff assignment if available. Organization. Each multi-member body board should establish written operating procedures and have an elected chair and other officers to facilitate meetings and the operations of the body. All written operating procedures and policies should be submitted to the select board at least 14 days prior to being in effect. Reporting. Each multi-member body must provide an annual report in writing each November or in person each fall that includes a summary of the body's work throughout the calendar year and recommendations to enhance or advance the operations of the body. Town employees. While town employees do not report to appointed officials or boards, many work with them. Appointees who work with staff are encouraged to develop a positive rapport with them to help ensure a positive feedback loop between policy and best practices. Ineffective professional relationships with staff should be addressed with the town manager. And then removal. A decision to terminate an appointment may be made by a majority of the select board subject to notice and a right to be heard per the town charter. And then section 7, I just annotates the key dates that were added in and noted throughout. So that way it's an easy guide for Elaine and for Heather. And so just recapping these dates, that March the 15th is when the list of upcoming vacancies are provided to the select board. The April the 1st is when the town manager employs her multimedia strategy to advertise upcoming vacancies. April the 1st is also when the town manager's office provides reappointment applications to appointees with terms to expire on June the 30th. That April the 30th is when those reappointment applications from incumbents are due to the town manager's office. That May 10th is the date the town manager's office needs to forward those reappointment applications to multi-member bodies with vacancies and request review and response. That June 1st is the date that responses by those multi-member bodies on reappointment request are due to the town manager's office. And that first and second Tuesday of June are when we will conduct our annual select board appointments. Do you guys want to
Can we roll down a little bit?
scroll down?
Yeah, scroll down.
there
So
more?
I want to go back up.
Uh,
Go back up. Yeah.
okay. To which part?
The town employees and the ineffective professional relationship with staff should be addressed with the town manager. So people working with staff would report them to the town manager. Is that what somebody on a committee who's not getting the feedback that they want from a town employee should report it to Heather?
That's the current.
Okay, so what is the recourse there then?
So current, do you want me to answer this or do you want to take this one?
I'm just wondering if there's, what is
I wanna
the
hear your
point of
answer.
reporting? I'm just wondering what the point of reporting that is if there's no recourse.
Yeah, so currently the way that the charter reads is that Heather is everyone's boss as far as
Yep.
employees go. And so if, for example, you are the parks commissioners, I'll use them as an example, and they have a staff assigned to work with them, rec director. And so the staff is hired by the town manager. The town that staff reports to the facilities director, who then reports to the town manager.
Uh-huh.
That if they're having difficulties in that relationship working with that position, that the appropriate response is to go to the town manager to discuss those difficulties to help get that problem resolved.
Okay, and if you do that multiple times, then what is the recourse?
Well, I mean, I think that if you're going to the town manager multiple times, then you have a bigger issue.
Yeah, I'm just wondering,
So typically,
because I
when
think that happened with the parks. Is that not correct?
typically what happens is
If you can
is
use
the
it as
town
an
manager-
example.
I'm using that as an example.
You are.
So I can't get into personnel actions, but typically what happens is the town manager will engage with the board that there may be some follow-up plans that happen with that employee to be able to address those performance concerns. Or there could be, a supervisory review. Supervisor could attend meetings with the board to observe how those interactions are going, and then make some feedback in the form of some feedback, a performance plan, and then there could be additional actions taken by the town or others if performances does not improve. So I can think of some successful examples that I probably shouldn't say on television.
No, I was just curious. Because
I would just add that there's a step in between coming to me.
Which is
It
addressing
really-
the people.
Well, no, it's their supervisor. You follow the chain of commands and it's addressed with the supervisor before it comes to me, but just skip over the chain of command.
so maybe we should write that in.
With the employees, should be addressed with the employee supervisor
Correct,
or town manager.
right.
Not or, because it's a
Sometime-
chain of command. She's saying the chain of command.
Sometimes it is,
So
there
with
is-
parks, it would have
there's
been
no in
DPW.
between.
Right, sometimes there is.
Sometimes it's-
Oh, okay.
Sometimes they report
Okay.
directly to the town manager.
Completely unrelated. So if we're done with this one,
Yes. Are we done, Heather?
Yeah, I was just curious, like, because if it's written down, there should be,
I need to.
a
make the
committee
notes.
would want to know what the recourse would be, I would think. They're finding it
Okay.
a hard situation.
so my comment is on the section on reappointments and in the old policy, it said, reappointments shall not be considered automatic, but all of our dates at the end of this policy are for reappointments. Why do we, if everyone's going to be treated the same in the appointment process, why don't we just make it appointments?
Yeah,
And take reappointment out of it completely?
So my notes, so a couple of things, my notes reflected that not all the dates are related to reappointment, that but I hear what you're saying. I think that my notes reflected that we wanted to have a distinctive reappointment process. And that we were holding a 4-to-1 majority on this one, which is the 4 of us. So if we can, I'm open to changing it if we want to consolidate the process.
So I guess I was a little confused as we went through this because the old policy was, encompassing of both appointments and reappointments. And this one seems to be just geared towards reappointments based on your dates at the end. There's no dates for when to submit your application. Maybe we modify the dates for appointment, reappointment applications or something like that. But if we're not trying to show preference, then why don't we just take the reappointment part out of it and just provide dates for get your application in for appointment by April 30th?
I think that we wanted to get feedback for anyone who's sitting in a role from the people that they've worked with.
but I thought we talked about how hard that would be for someone to write that feedback if they had found the person difficult. Or, because then are we reading that feedback?
So
We've seen it done.
I know, just
Yeah.
recently.
right now, we already send the forms out to the boards and committees that no one really responds.
Right.
Yeah, unless they have something positive to say, for the most part,
Well, yeah, with a couple.
with exceptions.
Yeah.
But generally, we don't get responses to the requests. So, Mr. Dwyer, your suggestion is to eliminate the reappointment process and just make it an appointment process every year.
Yeah,
Because they're not gonna get special treatment.
right.
Okay.
Hopefully to engage new people.
What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Franco? I'm not in favor of that. I really think that I want to hear from someone who served on a board with someone if they want to offer. I'd like to get that feedback because just because someone's been on a board, I don't know what they really did for that term.
Well, that's what the interview process is for.
Right. That's why it's not called reappointment. That's why it's just, they're gonna go in the same.
So there are 2 other forms that's in the drive about what these applications look like, which we can get to later, but or next meeting.
Not later. How about not later?
There is no later.
Yeah, next meeting. What are your thoughts, Mr. Franco?
I mean, I don't see a problem keeping it separate. I understand what the colleagues are saying, but I think just because it's separately delineated doesn't necessarily indicate that there's special treatment going on. So I don't.
Well, I'm just wondering, is it just unnecessary?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there's special treatment. I'm just saying, is it unnecessary? Can we just make it an appointment policy? And we can still have date in, like, you know, the chair of each board will notify the current board members of the existing vacancies that are coming up and which terms are expiring.
Might need a little more time to think about this.
I think I need to see this in front of me. I can't really see that.
Okay.
I need it and I need to see it.
So now that we've hit the meeting and now that we've shared this, why don't we circulate this?
I
It's
didn't think
in,
any decisions were gonna be made anyways.
No,
for
there's-
the full board,
you are correct.
yeah.
But I think
Oh,
everyone
we were
needs to see
definitely
this.
gonna make a
so-
decision without
Hoping to
Mr.
take it
Alonso.
No,
Not
no.
at all.
We're looking to review it and get feedback so I can make more modifications for the next time we talk about it.
Okay, because I
So-
need to see it.
All right. So it's in the Google Drive. I think it sounds like
It
it's gonna
is?
take a few minutes to upload. Yeah, because I don't see it on mine, but I do see it on Heather's. So it's there, but we just don't see it yet. So we'll pick this conversation back up. Any other initial thoughts on appointments, reappointments as presented tonight? All right, in your Google Drive, if you go into the appointments folder, you're also going to see the appointment application form. And then also the reappointment application. And so if you have any feedback for either of those, let's just plan to discuss.
You mean the volunteer application?
Correct. What did I say? I know I didn't say it correct. So you should see the volunteer application and the reappointment
Where's the
application.
reappointment application?
It's the second page of it.
Oh,
So what I tried to do on this application was the board's guidance was, if you can go back to the appointment form, I'm looking at off of yours, Mr. Franco, that the board's guidance on this was to eliminate the descriptions of what each one does, to do a referral back to the website, which I believe that does, to abbreviate in some form that initial blurb that's at the top of the page. And so with this, and then also to eliminate the precinct from the request, and to give the residents more room to give some background about themselves. It was also really specific about changing from, using the phrase related skills, that my notes reflected that we wanted to use that for background instead of background. And so what it is it's this front information, a little bit more space for whoever fills this out to provide some related skill information, and then to clearly identify that we want them to rank 1 through 5, up to 5 options of what they would, what they're interested in volunteering for. And then the reappointment application, which is the second page of this, it's similar verbiage to what's already in the reappointment application. It just condenses it to one page now. Really makes it just to the point. How have you contributed? Where do you, that's the first question. The second one is, what unique skills or talents do you possess that, is basically valuable for this role that benefits the board? And then the last question is a carryover from the existing, which is asking about the resources that could be used to facilitate the board or committee.
I have a couple minor comments.
Yes, absolutely.
I really like the reappointment application changes. One of the things I see is, I think the volunteer application for appointments that are regular appointments, not interim appointments, there should be a date to get it into the town manager, similar to the reappointment application. I think that'd be useful. And the other is the second question on the reappointment for identify unique skills or talents that you possess that will further benefit the board committee to which you are seeking reappointment. I think that phrasing could be added to the appointment form as well, to which you are seeking appointment. And would give more than just the item there that says related skills on the appointment application. I think it's a little more pointed and would be useful. Those are my two comments.
So as I look at revising that, so you would take that second question, kind of put that as the first question, and then below that ask related skills? Or would you substitute?
Well, I would substitute it. I think that would give you the related skills that you're looking for.
Okay.
But I think it gives a little more instruction to the applicant of kind of what we're want them to relate to us.
Selectwoman Soroka, you say something?
Can we just call it a reappointment volunteer application? If we're gonna call it a volunteer application,
Say again?
reappointment volunteer application.
Reappointment.
It's a volunteer application, so then it's a reappointment volunteer application, right?
Or volunteer reappointment.
Yeah, one of
application.
the, you gotta, keep them consistent,
Yeah, volunteer.
you're right? It's
Yeah.
gotta be.
Would
still
it be volunteer
consistent.
reappointment application?
Yeah,
Okay. Any other initial thoughts? All right. So I will make those revisions. I'll send them to the town manager since we've already discussed it. And then the town manager will send them back out to you guys. So that way we can discuss it for next week,
no, there's no meeting next week.
or not next week, the next meeting.
Okay.
So.
Don't make a meeting. There's a field hockey game.
All right. Any other comments, thoughts on that tonight? All right. Okay. I'm looking at the time here tonight. I'm gonna skip old business and go down to current business. Is that okay with everyone?
Works for me.
Okay. Current business, approval of minutes from August the 23rd, 2022. Has everyone had the chance to look at the meeting minutes? And if so, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any additional discussion? There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion passes. Are we prepared to vote for the release of the executive session minutes as reflected on the agenda?
I reviewed them.
Okay,
Did anyone else?
no.
Okay, so then no, we're not.
No, not review them. But if the majority wants to vote for them, then we can vote. We prepare to vote? All right. Warrants, action and action items. No warrants this evening. Any action items? All right, let's jump to committee reports. Any committee reports?
School committee meets tomorrow
School committee meets tomorrow,
on Zoom,
6:30 Zoom.
Zoom.
Okay,
This past Thursday, the Stormwater Task Force met and we reorganized. Welcome 3 new members. And I was elected chair.
oh,
Next meeting's the 3rd Thursday in October.
congratulations.
Wow.
Thank you.
I have none.
I have 2. So the zoning board of appeals met here last week, and Ms. Soroka was there, Mr. Alonso came, as well as the entire room was packed. So it was a full house. We had, I was in the standing gallery area. But every chair was taken, as I
And
recall.
all those stairs that are,
And it was all in this area. I mean, the whole room was full. It was really just a preliminary introduction to the project over on Howard Street, in which the project principals did a really brief introduction. The zoning board of appeals asked some really basic questions, and then really it was an opportunity for the public to get up and vocalize their concerns. I made a comment that was representative, I thought, of the board's perspective, and also representative of probably everyone else's viewpoint in the room. I thought the whole thing was, I gave some background on how we got to this point in this process. it was a really preliminary, like I said, it was an initial meeting. What came out of it was a couple of things stood out to me, that they have not engineered these building plans yet, that they just haven't gotten to that point in the process. So they're starting off with really just a schematic design. It's, you know, it seems pretty clear what's about to happen, but it seems they're still at the very beginning, I think, of this process themselves. So next meeting is scheduled as noted tonight on October the 12th. So the meeting on the 12th is focused on water and sewer. This board has taken the position, as supported by town council, that even if we concede that the language of local board includes the sewer district and the water district, that we do not concede that those boards have the authority to expand the districts, that is a legislative function. And so we've taken the position last year that we are going to defend the legislative body, which is town meeting, that it is strictly their authority to expand the sewer district, and that it is within the rights of those who live within the water district, and only those, the legislative aspect of the water district, who can expand the water district. And that the zoning board of appeals, even if they do take on the functions of those boards, they don't take on the functions of town meeting. It seems as if the meeting on October the 12th is going to be focused on that point. And town council has already prepared a letter last year on our behalf that represents that viewpoint. They are in receipt of that letter. So the expectation was that their council was going to provide our council and the ZBA with a response basically by the end of the month. And then that they would come prepared on the 12th to discuss that point. So I don't know how the process moves forward on those points without that being resolved. So that's the purpose of the meeting on the 12th. I expect a pretty big turnout, and I will be there as well. The other update is the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. So I mentioned previously that we got to a point where we came up with 3 scenarios. We met again last night for about 2 hours, and the entire meeting was on those 3 scenarios and really ironing them down. And talking, I would say talking through them to figure out what the pros and cons are of each different area, what the potential cost implications are of each different area, you know, kind of what are we missing? And so I'm not going to present any part of that until we have a joint meeting with the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. So right now we're looking to have a joint meeting on October the 11th, second meeting in October with the Municipal Building Design Committee. This one should be a little briefer, but it's going to be a presentation from the Municipal Building Design on these 3 options. And then kind of, and there may be a 4th hybrid that comes out of our next meeting. And I'm thinking there's probably going to be. And so then I think what we're looking for next is feedback from this board on how to proceed. I think that you know, it's each option has something good and something bad. So I mean, one option is looking at 30 School Street, one option is looking at a Ritter building expansion, one option is looking at TC Passios. So it really is kind of looking at all 3 areas of where the new town hall will be, and then figuring out what makes sense. So again, joint meeting on the 11th, the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee will meet again in October prior to that meeting to really finalize that and start putting together a presentation for this board. So I will join the Municipal Building Design Committee down there for that meeting. So I will leave just for that. I find it really difficult to be in 2 meetings at the same time, especially when I expect that there will be questions coming to me as the chair of that board. So it's hard. And you're looking at me kind of confused, Heather.
Well, Mr. Alonso will be running our part of the meeting.
Mr. Alonso will be
Or the whole
chairing
meeting.
that portion of the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, not the meeting, just that portion of the meeting. All right. That's all I have for committee reports. Do you have anything, Heather?
No.
Any committee reports from you? All right, upcoming meeting schedule. Next meeting is going to be in October the 3rd, and then we're meeting again on the 11th, and that is a joint meeting. 4th, thank you. And then we have a joint meeting on the 11th, as noted with the Municipal Building Design Committee. Any public comments this evening from the public?
No.
Any public comments from the town manager?
No.
Any public comments from the board? I have one. Anyone who's at home that's been toughing it out and staying with us this long, we do try to set aside one meeting a month to focus on a workshop. In which we can go through our policies, we can kind of dig into some issues a little more meaty. They're probably not, these workshop meetings are not always the most entertaining at home, I'm sure. But it's really healthy for us to build these build good dynamics amongst each other to really work through some of these more meatier topics. All right, and generally I look for doing them on the second or third of every month, never the first meeting of every month. And that's all I have for public comments. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, and the time is 9:39. We have a motion to adjourn and a second. Any additional discussion? Are all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes and we are adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.